Have you ever sat in that heavy silence at a family dinner? Here on Human Stories, we retell those moments honest, everyday, sometimes controversial. Every story is a mirror. Subscribe, join the conversation, and maybe find a little healing. The Spanish ballroom gleamed like a jewelry box. Crystal chandeliers threw small suns across polished marble. At the far end, a black G63 sat on a riser with a red bow fat as a wound. A jazz trio folded smoke into the corners. Glass chimed. Perfume hung sweet and citrusy. I stepped out of my heels. The stone was cold through my stockings. My right hand, the one with the long-ago burn from a bread peel, tightened around a flute. Sloane raised her glass. She was carried by the room, gold dress, hair that never moved, a smile rehearsed in a mirror with lights around it. She waited for hush, then tilted the microphone closer. A toast to a mother who thinks love is wholesale. Laughter rippled. A few cruel cracks inside it. Tyler looked down and worried the rim of his glass until it sang one small bright note that made my teeth ache. I let the smile touch my mouth, not my eyes. The red bow across the hood seemed to breathe when the air conditioning kicked on. In the reflection on the SUV's tinted window, I look taller than I am, older than I feel. The music slid back in soft as velvet. I set my glass down and placed my heels on the riser-edged toes, pointed toward the car like two arrows. Then I stepped away. Months earlier, the heat in my life came from more honest places. Steam rising from a rack of sourdough, flower storms that turned my hair gray in a day, the hum of mixers at 4 a.m. in our Georgetown kitchen. Hearth and Hope started on a folding table under a leaky awning at the Pike Street entrance to the bus tunnel. I sold palmiers in the rain until my fingers cracked. When the second shop opened in Pioneer Square, I hung my grandmother's rolling pin over the register. 18 locations later, the pin still smelled faintly of cinnamon oil. Tyler grew up in proofing drawers and back seats, high school algebra beside a stack of sheet pans. He can still braid a kala in his sleep. He was the one who said we should paint the Georgetown space blue to look less like a garage. He has my husband's patience. He has my impatience, too. A dangerous mix when ambition slides in wearing lipstick. Sloane arrived with a camera flash at a Capitol Hill launch hand looped through my son's arm like she had always been there. She tasted a croissant and announced that butter was having a renaissance. People laughed then, too. She was the story she needed that night. Daughter of diplomats, or a model who left Paris for love. She wanted the room to see Tyler as a man who belonged with a woman like her, or the other way around. Tiny things turned sideways. Dinner at their house on Queen Anne. My coffee always arrived cool to the touch. Once a paper cup with a plastic lid sat beside a saucer of porcelain for everyone else. So we don't risk another spill, Sloane said, eyes soft. At our staff party, she switched my dinner plate with a BPA-safe plastic one and called it thoughtful. The office walls at HQ sprouted chrome and a living moss panel no one watered. A new espresso system cost more than a delivery van. The old mixer with the chipped guard went to the dumpster. Tyler said, "Let her modernize. She knows this world." I nodded and pretended the word world did not bruise. People who have not worked mornings think cruelty arrives like a storm. It is more often a mist you live inside until the mirror fogs. Keys in the freezer, a check I did not remember signing. "It happens," the bank manager said and turned his mouth into pity. Sloane touched my elbow. "We all forget things," she whispered. "It is not your fault." The day that made the room snap into focus smelled like lemons and new carpet. I let myself into their house with the key I had not returned. The hallway rug was thick enough to swallow footfalls. Voices drifted from the study. The door was almost closed. 3 witnesses, Sloane said into her phone. Her voice was sugared for someone who was not me. The housekeeper is 1. The gardener is 2. Dr. Klein already has the report ready. Mild cognitive impairment, impaired judgment. We need the car to seal it. No judge will argue when she gives a 40-year-old a $300,000 toy. Silence on the other end, then her laugh. Tyler will sign what I put under his hand. He is tired of being the baker's son. After we move assets into the new structure, we can talk about timing. Sunridge Haven said midnight intake is fine. The view is pretty. She will be happy there. The wall was cool on my shoulder. I could see the edge of the study mirror from the crack of the door. The mirror held a ghost of Sloane's face in the street behind her, lake glitter under a pale sky. My heartbeat settled to the steady thump of the old Hobart mixer in my head. A delivery truck hissed brakes outside. I watched dust spark in a shaft of window light. "No, we are not killing her," she said finally. "We are protecting her from herself." She hung up. Paper slid. A drawer clicked shut. I stepped back into the lemon smell and stared at my own hands. The scar across my right knuckle is the size of a lentil. It has always looked like a button you press when you need to remember who you are. I pressed it. That night, I baked 6 loaves I did not need. Hands know before the head says yes. A pinch of salt, heavy as a promise. When the first crust crackled, the noise sounded like small glass breaking. I ate the heel with butter that was too cold and felt the scrape of toast on the roof of my mouth. The city hissed in the rain. The cooling rack ticked like a clock. The next morning I put on lipstick I had not worn in a year and forgot the name of the vendor I have known since the second lease. At the operations meeting, I arrived in slippers and a silk blouse. "Sorry," I said and smiled at the ceiling. I thought this was the kitchen. The room laughed a softer sound, confused. I asked for the sales report twice. Later alone, I repeated the names of all my team like a rosary. Maria, Nate, Quien, Jerome, Tessa. Lila says lists keep the mind quick. Lila would know. She has been with me 30 years and hides spare keys under the third planter from the left. At Sunday dinner, Sloan placed a children's fork by my plate. "So we do not have any accidents." Tyler flinched. I traded the fork for a normal one when she turned to the fridge. When she left the room, I opened the freezer. The cold breathed. My keyring was on the shelf next to a bag of peas. I closed the door without taking it. I do not pray to be gentle. I pray to be precise. On Monday, I stood in the office with the blue wall and the moss panel and told the empty room, "Silence is a blade." Then I picked up my second phone, the older one with a crack across the corner and a number only 2 people know. When the line clicked, I kept my voice low. "Noah, I need you to turn her life inside out." Noah answered on the second ring. Rain sang against metal on his end, a steady tap like fingers on a countertop. "Name," he said. "Sloan Reyes," I said. "Queen Anne House. Charms rooms for a living." There was a quiet breath. "Where do we meet Ferry Terminal Coffee Stand?" 10 minutes. He arrived with a windbreaker that smelled faintly of diesel and peppermint. Close-cut hair gone silver at the edges. He listened the way bakers listen for the change in approving dough, leaning just enough eyes steady. I told him what I had heard were the phrasing the time. He wrote the keywords with a blunt pencil on a napkin and circled Sunridge Haven twice. "I will need 2 weeks," he said. "Maybe less. I will need a number that never appears on a bill." I slid the older phone across the table. He touched its cracked corner and nodded. When he left, the ferry horn blew low and heavy. The coffee tasted burned and sweet. Lila did not ask, although she saw the new tightness in my shoulders. She set tea by my elbow and let the steam do the talking. That night, I walked to the Georgetown kitchen and stood by the mixer until the room fell quiet, and the stainless cooled to a dark mirror. The scar on my hand itched. I pressed it and waited for my own thinking to proof. The first thing back from Noah was a photo of a passport. The name read Mara Daniela Alvarez, Caracas, a date that did not match Sloan's. He sent a second photo, a marriage certificate in Spanish to a man named Diego Martin. The paper was creased and stamped. The third file was a printout of social feeds for a woman named Vanessa Herrera, who had posted a wedding picture in Chiapas that showed a narrow face and a mole Sloan pretends she does not have. Noah called after midnight. "She is not who she says she is," he said. "She is already married and is using the shell of another woman's life. There are old complaints in Venezuela about wire fraud that never landed because she vanished." I lay awake and watched the streetlight paint the ceiling. Far away, a train sounded its horn. My jaw felt like a vice. The rolling pin above the register in Pioneer Square seemed to glow in my mind like a plank from a ship. Theo came on board the next morning. He is Lila's son and has been in my kitchen since he was in a stroller with a snap of Cheerios. He stands a head taller than Tyler and still looks like the boy who once took apart the broken pager clock just to hand me the working faceplate. He brought a laptop and a set of small tools and asked for the guest password to the new HQ network. The moss wall behind him looked greener than it had any right to. He worked with the blank calm that comes to people who love puzzles. Heat from the machines lifted and fell. "Her email is sloppy," he said without looking up. She leaves drafts in the trash instead of deleting. She forwards receipts to her own account. The foundation is interesting. He turned the screen. The website for Rise NW looks spotless. The mission statement spoke in polished phrases. The cost reports did not. 90% to administrative. The treasurer shared a last name with a stylist on Sloane's Instagram. There were transfers split into repeated amounts just under thresholds that trigger flags. Theo went quiet. Here, he said and enlarged a line. Dr. Klein. Consultation. 15,000. Lila's phone lived in her apron pocket alongside 3 hairpins and a single peppermint that had stuck to the wrapping. She used it the way she uses yeast, patient and regular. Cash leaving a purse on a hall table. A pen moving on a check in a kitchen after wine. A voice on speaker beside a stove whispering instructions to a bank manager about words like impaired and vulnerable. We stored the files twice, 3 times for luck. Patricia Monroe's office sat high in a building that had a view of the water and a carpet that did not show footprints. She kept a fountain pen whose nib had survived 2 divorces and 1 fire. She set a cup of black tea by my right hand and another by my left as if preparing for a chess match. You want transfer documents that look like a highway, she said, but feed into a cul-de-sac. She drafted papers with cool efficiency. Each line read clean. Each paragraph contained a hinge. The transfer Sloane would press Tyler to sign would wait politely for a second signature she would never know existed. The power looked present and would hold nothing. Patricia tucked a copy into a folder the color of wet slate. Make your real home somewhere she does not know to look, she said. Put air between your assets and the weather. Blue hearth. Holdings already existed in Wyoming as a quiet box with a key only in my pocket. It held the recipes in their legal dress, the names, the logos, the real bones of Hearth and Hope. Stores could move like shirts. The cloth was mine. A banker in a small office that smelled faintly of cedar took my signatures and slid papers under a glass that reflected a fluorescent light like a seam of cloud. I signed short-term leases under one of my older LLCs in Spokane near the Hospital Hill in Boise, on a block with murals and bend between a bike shop and a place that sells fly rods. The managers I chose were women who had once been told they did not have the look we were aiming for. Their hands were capable hands. They sent me photos of empty rooms that already felt like kitchens because the light was right. At Swedish, Dr. Olivia Chen ran tests with the calm precision of someone who likes numbers more than talk. MRI, EEG. 8 hours at a desk, tracing lines through faint mazes, while a tech marked my answers with the quiet rhythm of a metronome. The hospital smelled of lemon cleaner and boiled linens. She asked me what day it was. She asked me to repeat 5 words and then remember them after a story. She wrote a sentence on her pad and asked me to copy it. When we were done, she capped her pen and looked up. Your cognition is intact, she said simply. If anyone says otherwise, they will need to explain why these results do not exist. I thanked her and held the report the way bakers hold a loaf just out of the oven with a rag to keep from burning. Margot Bell taught acting in a studio above a dancewear shop that clattered with taps at all hours. She had been a minor star on a network show 15 years ago and treated breath the way I treat salt. She stood me in front of a mirror framed in bulbs and told me to make my eyes misfire for a second. She taught me how to misname a thing, just once in a way that felt like life and not a scene. She placed a children's fork in my hand and made me forget what it was for one heartbeat, then let recognition return. We worked until sweat cooled on my back. At a fundraiser for a gallery I have never liked, Sloane handed me a tiny fork with a smile that would photograph well. I let the weight of it sit for a count, then traded it quietly with the one at Tyler's place setting while she turned to greet a blogger. Tyler saw, and his eyes flicked to mine, then away. He rubbed the base of his glass with his thumb. The stem sang one bright note and died. We went to the Mercedes dealership in Sodo on a late morning when the air smelled like rubber and oil and new leather. The salesman had a smile that showed he played golf. Sloane took control before the door had finished closing behind us. AMG G63. Black. Saddle leather. Full package, she said. Headrests embroidered with "For Tyler" from Mom. From Mom, I repeated, and the salesman wrote it without looking at me. I waited until he asked about plates. I said, "Reckon 40. The salesman looked confused. Sloane laughed. "Reckoning," she said. She enjoys words. We walked the floor. Every polished hood held a warped sky. I agreed to a bank transfer rather than a check. Sloane posed by the grill for her friend to take a picture and told her followers that generosity is a language. The keys lay in a crystal box as if they were jewels. I signed, and my right hand felt the memory of heat. Sunridge Haven sat outside Spokane on a hill with long grass and a parking lot without shade. Dr. Sato met me in a conference room with water in a carafe and 2 paper cups. His tie was plain, his eyes were tired. I set a copy of the deposit receipt on the table facing him. I pushed it with one finger. "She paid you to take me without consent," I said. "She misrepresented facts to your staff. If the men she hired come to collect me at any hour, they will be filmed doing it. If you want to avoid being part of that, you will call me when they are on their way, and you will follow my instructions closely." He closed his eyes for a second and then opened them. He looked at the paper, then at me. "We take people only with proper orders," he said. "Your night staff did not get that memo," I said. He folded his hands. "What do you need?" A day later, my old phone had a new voicemail. Sloane's voice had the shape she uses with lovers. The room around me went quiet of its own accord, as if the air had agreed to hold still. "The baby is not his mi amor," she said softly. "After the party, we are gone. The money lands, and we fly. We will be warm, I promise." I saved the message twice and did not move for a long time. The sun slid a palm of light across the blue wall of HQ. The moss looked dead and persisted anyway. I could hear the Georgetown mixer turning over a lot I was not there to see. When I told Lila, she pressed her hands together as if in church and then let them fall. She did not say a thing. She adjusted the angle of the wooden spoon in the crock by the stove and put water on for tea. We began to sew the seam that would hold. Patricia packaged the test results and the bank files in a way that felt like a recipe card stack, stiff and exact. Theo tied off a cable behind the ballroom's control booth after a paid visit to an event planner I did not want to meet. Noah confirmed that Diego had a passport and could stand in a doorway where Sloane would see him. Rosa Alvarez sent a voice message from a place with roosters and crying babies in the background. Her Spanish was soft and cut clean. She said she would come. At HQ late, I took the red bow out of its silk bag. It was bigger than it had looked under the ballroom lights. Satin has a particular smell. It is a little like dust and a little like the inside of a new book. I ran my fingers along the ribbon until I found the seam where the knot sits. I slid a USB drive into the pocket of fabric and pressed the satin flat until the shape hid itself. I leaned back and looked at the bow on my desk. The light from the window caught the edge and lit it like a vein. I touched the scar on my knuckle. Heat rose from the cup of tea Lila had left for me. Somewhere a freight horn called and went quiet. I lifted the bow and felt its cool weight in my hands. Patricia slid a folder across her desk. The sun came in at an angle that made the paper glow. She had written my name with a fountain pen in a hand that did not waver. "This sits on top of what we built," she said. "Hearth and Dignity Trust. Blue hearth stays the spine. If someone tries to peel away pieces, they find paper that appears to move but does not." Her office was quiet enough to hear the whisper of the pen cap. The tea between us went from hot to warm. I signed where she pointed. The ink shone wet for a second and went dull. "Keep the original with me," she said. "Carry the certified copy that looks official enough to scare people who like to bluff." On the sidewalk outside, the air had that harbor smell that sneaks up the avenues. I put the folder against my chest and felt my heart beat through the cardstock. A bus sighed. Across the street, someone held a bouquet too large for one hand. Lila walked with me 2 blocks and then peeled off toward the market. She was a woman who knows where to be when a room needs to change temperature. She kissed my cheek and left the paper smell in my scarf. Noah set the meetings with the steadiness of a bricklayer. Aaron Pike from the prosecutor's office met us in a space filled with law books and one plant that had survived on intention. He had clean hands and eyes with a bit of red around the edges. He read Patricia's summary and did not interrupt. "You're saying the physician is fabricating a diagnosis to influence financial control," he said. "I am saying someone paid him to write a story about me that is not true," I said. "There is more." Theo placed a small drive in Aaron's palm. His hand closed and opened like he was testing the weight. He watched the first clip without sound. He nodded once. "And Sunridge?" he asked. "They took money," I said. "They will not take me." Aaron looked at the calendar on his wall as if it might change by staring. He tapped his pen against a book. The tap sounded like a clock. I have a separate matter on Dr. Klein, he said. Parallel lines sometimes touch when light bends. I will be present where I am allowed. Noah took care of the names that lived far from Seattle. He found Diego in a motel near a freeway outside San Diego. In the photo Noah sent, the bedspread had a geometric pattern and Diego held a styrofoam cup. He had the sloped shoulders of someone who spends days lifting things that do not belong to him. His eyes, when he looked into the camera, were the color of strong tea. "Tell me where to stand," he said over a choppy call. "I will stand there." Vanessa Herrera answered from a kitchen with tile that reflected daylight. A rooster crossed the background and left a tail of noise. Noah spoke Spanish with a rough edge. She listened with her head tipped as if hearing something behind the words. "My name has its own life in your city," she said. "It is time to ask for it back." Rosa Alvarez called after dark. Her voice carried the hush of someone talking near sleeping children. She said she could come. She said she had documents in a tin that once held powdered milk. When she hung up the phone, showed a line of missed calls from unknown numbers. I put it face down and waited for my pulse to slow. The party planning moved in a froth that had nothing to do with us. A designer sent a mood board with gold arcs and a palette named Champagne. Sloan sent Tyler to sign checks and make decisions about small plates he did not care about. He came home smelling like the hotel's air and lay on the couch with his arm over his eyes. "You should not have to think about this," I said. He moved his arm and looked at me with pupils too wide for the light. "She wants it to be perfect," he said. "For me, for everyone." He scratched the base of his glass with his thumbnail and the sound found the old hurt behind my teeth. He dropped his hand and said nothing more. Theo walked the Spanish ballroom with a lanyard that said vendor. He wore an all-black outfit that made him look like a shadow. He asked for the lighting schedule and nodded as if this was a normal errand. In the control booth, he ran a cable as slim as a shoelace behind bundles of more important wires. He stood very still and watched the screens change out of sequence and come back. He smiled without showing teeth. "Sound will be your problem," he said later. "Video is ours." Noah got me a short meeting with the head of hotel security. The man had a chest like a refrigerator and a wedding ring that had been resized more than once. He understood the kind of quiet that keeps business alive. He accepted the packet Aaron had allowed and filed it in a drawer that already knew its shape. "If someone calls for help in a way that is not help, I will send the right people," he said. "Do not break the ballroom." In the Georgetown kitchen, I rehearsed small losses. Forget a title for 2 seconds, then find it with a blink. Use the wrong door and laugh at myself. Lila would look up and give a nod that meant, yes, that is the right size of mistake. I practiced the way a face goes slack when a word slips. It felt like standing too close to a cliff. My body remembered what it was built to do. At 3 a.m, the ovens blew heat that curled my hairline. The first batch went in, and the air turned to something between toast and sugar. The metal of the peel seared my palm through the rag for a tick. The scar pressed back against my skin from the inside. Dr. Olivia Chen called and kept it brief. She would be available to speak to the numbers. She would bring her original notes. She would not add words she did not have. Patricia finished a set of letters with seals that looked heavier than they were. She placed them in envelopes lined with gray paper. The paper made a small sound when I slid a finger under the flap. She watched me place each one in a satchel, and then she locked the empty drawer and sat for a minute with her hands folded. "You are not required to stay in the room," she said. "I know," I said. The red bow waited in its silk bag like a sleeping thing. When I pulled it out, the fabric cooled my palms. The seam where I had tucked the drive held. I tightened it with 2 small stitches that nested inside the weave. Satin has no patience for clumsy hands. It shows every slip. I smoothed it until the surface lay flat and the knot remembered what it was supposed to be. Theo held a tester under the bow and watched a small light turn green. He did it again and then a third time for luck. He looked at me, and for a second I saw the boy with the broken pager clock. "Everything that needs to appear will appear," he said. Lila ironed my navy dress on the old board with the scorch mark that looks like a map of an island chain. Steam rose and drifted toward the kitchen light. She stitched a tag into the hem with my initials, even though no one was going to see. The sound of the needle moving through fabric was small and exact. In the afternoon, rain came in with a soft patter that changed traffic noise into a hush. Tyler stopped by the Georgetown kitchen on his way to the hotel. He stood in the doorway and watched me dust a rack with flour. He did not come in. He put his hand flat against the doorframe and leaned like a man too tired to stand straight. "You look good in that color," he said. "You look like you need sleep," I said. He smiled without humor. "After tonight," he said, and then shut his mouth on the rest of the sentence. He reached out and brushed flour from my sleeve with the back of his fingers. His eyes were his father's eyes for a second, and then they were his own again. By evening, the Spanish ballroom smelled like citrus and candle wax. Technicians rolled the G63 in on wide dollies that did not mark the floor. The crystal box for the keys sat on a pedestal the color of a new bruise. Someone tested the lights and filled the room with a golden wash that made the mirrors look like they held other rooms behind the glass. The air conditioning shivered and the bow's tails lifted and fell as if the car had exhaled. I placed my heels by the riser and felt the marble with the ball of my foot. The knot held. The silk was cool. The reflection in the window showed a woman with a dress the color of late water and a hand with a scar that had been there long enough to be part of her. The band tuned. A glass chimed. I set the bow with both hands and stepped back until I could see the whole shape hold. The band softened to a hush that made the chandelier sound like glass breathing. Sloane lifted her flute and the room tilted toward her. Gold-dressed perfect mouth, a shine that liked the camera. A toast, she said, bright as a bell. To a mother who thinks love is wholesale. Laughter broke across the marble. It moved in rings, some of it nervous, some of it sharp. Tyler looked down and turned his glass until it sang one clear note that hopped along the mirrors. I stepped up and set my fingers on the microphone. The bow on the G63 settled as the air unit clicked off. The knot looked like a heart pulled tight. I tasted metal at the back of my mouth. To reckoning, I said, and pressed send. The ballroom screens woke like eyes. The first clip opened on a hallway table. Sloane's hand entered the frame. She lifted cash from my purse and smiled at her own reflection in the glass of a framed photo. "Stupid old woman," her voice said. Someone near the riser sucked in air. The second clip was my kitchen at night. A check under a lamp. A pen moved with my name at the bottom. The sounds were small and intimate. The bank manager appeared on a later day. "It happens," he said on speaker. "Impaired judgment is common." Sloane's voice off camera, soft and helpful, thanked him. The third clip was inside an office with blinds half closed. Dr. Klein shuffled papers. Sloane slid an envelope across the desk. He palmed it and said the words he had practiced. Mild cognitive impairment, limited capacity. He shut off his recorder and smiled without his eyes. The fourth was a waveform on a screen, then a line of text, then sound. "The baby is not his mi amor," Sloane said, gentle as a lullaby. "After the party, we are gone." Her voice filled the air like perfume. The room did not move for a breath. A glass fell somewhere and broke in a music that stung. Tyler's face lost its color. He set his glass down and missed the coaster by an inch. He stared at the screen and blinked like a man pulling out of a dark tunnel into sun. Sloane's smile thinned. "Turn that off." "That is edited," she called. She looked toward the booth as if she could frighten the equipment. Her heels clicked too loudly when she moved. I lifted my hand. "There are guests," I said. The doors opened. Diego Martin crossed the threshold in a clean shirt with a collar that had seen better days. He walked as if gravity had a hand on his shoulder. He stopped where the carpet changed and looked straight at Sloane. "Mara," he said. His accent held a tired dignity. "We are still married." Her mouth opened and shut. "You cannot be here," she said. "You are not involved." Next, through the doors, was a slender woman with a long braid and a white blouse. She stood the way people stand in photos they expect to keep. "I am Vanessa Herrera," she said. "I did not die. I speak for my name." A rustle like wind in reeds went through the room. Some of the guests shifted to see better. A camera phone lit. Assistant District Attorney Aaron Pike came in with 2 officers. He did not take the microphone. He did not raise his voice. He held a folder and spoke to the nearest security supervisor. The officers stood where they could see both exits. He nodded to me and then to Patricia, who had appeared at my side without seeming to walk. Dr. Olivia Chen stepped to the edge of the light. "I evaluated Evelyn Hart," she said when someone asked who she was. "Her cognition is intact." She did not look at Sloane. She addressed the room the way a teacher addresses a class that needs facts and not relief. Jenna Price moved forward with her chin set and her hands steady. "Sloane took $150,000 from me for a handbag import business. That was not real," she said. "I have transfers and contracts that do not lead to any goods." She lifted a thin folder and passed it to Aaron. He looked briefly and placed it in the larger one. Rosa Alvarez entered last. She had a face that had been a map for working lines and tender ones. She carried a tin that had lost its label long ago. She looked at Sloane and did not hurry to speak. Mara Rosa said, and the name folded around the room. Was it worth your father's savings? Sloane backed up one step, then another. Her heel caught the edge of a cable cover. She recovered with a small flail and smoothed her dress with hands that did not quite meet the fabric. This is a setup, she said. This is slander. Tyler, say something. Tyler looked at her as if he had forgotten the alphabet and could not put letters together. He breathed once and his breath shook. He turned his head toward me. You staged this, he said, not quite a question. I endured this, I said. I recorded it. I am done enduring. He closed his eyes. A muscle worked in his jaw. He opened them and they were full of something raw that looked like a boy who had stayed up too late and woke in a room that had moved. Sloane tried the back hallway. A waiter stepped without looking and blocked her instinctively. The security supervisor moved at a calm pace that said he had shepherded wedding fights and political fundraisers and NBA after-parties. He put a hand out without touching her, and the officers approached at a measured angle. Aaron spoke low to Sloane. His voice did not travel. He held up a paper and a phone at the same time as if balancing true and proof on a scale. The officers did their job with a competence that looked like boredom to the untrained eye. They noted her jewelry. They noted her hands. They waited until she was done speaking before moving. The bracelets clicked once. The room did not breathe until the elevator doors closed. When the doors slid together, a murmur rose that was not laughter and not kindness. The band leader wiped his forehead with a clean handkerchief. The key box on its pedestal looked suddenly cheap. The bow on the G63 settled again. Satin has its own weather. The knot gleamed. The tail brushed the crystal and made a small sound. Tyler took 3 steps toward me and then stopped. His hands were empty. He had nowhere to put them. He looked at the floor and then at my face. You lied to me, he said quietly. I played small so that the truth could get a seat at the table, I said. When I tried to speak before, you did not hear me. His mouth opened. The old resentment tried to stand. It wavered and sat back down. He pressed his thumb into his palm until the skin went white. He looked at the screen where Dr. Klein's office had been and made a face like he had bitten metal. A plate slipped from a server's hand and shattered. The sound was bright and fast. It cut through the murmurs and left a clean silence. The chandeliers hummed. People left in clusters. Shoes clicked. The perfume shifted to a trace and then to nothing. The ballroom felt suddenly like a warehouse with expensive lights. Aaron came back from wherever he had made calls and stood with Patricia. They spoke to security. The hotel staff wheeled the car slowly toward a service door. The bow did not ripple. It was a calm sea on a black hull. When the last of the guests were gone, Tyler sat on a chair that had never been made to hold a man in that shape. He put his face in his hands and did not cry. His shoulders shook once and then stayed. I took a step, then another, then stopped. He looked up and flinched. Do not touch me, he said. Please, not yet. I nodded. Lila stood nearby with her hands clasped near her waist. Theo collected his cable with a reverence that belongs to people who handle delicate things. He looked to me for a small sign. I gave it. He slipped the line into a pocket the size of a spoon. Patricia remained a calm blue place in a storm and explained in a voice that soothed without promising. The marriage is bigamous, she said to Tyler. It is void. Joint assets that exist on paper can be unwound. The real assets are held elsewhere. The filings tonight will prevent movement. You will eat paperwork. It will not eat you. Tyler nodded without quite seeing her. He stood and his knees did not lock right. He put his hand out and then let it fall. We are not done, he said, and then stopped the sentence. At 3 a.m, the hallway outside Sloane's suite held the quiet of a sleeping hotel. 2 men in scrubs walked with a stretcher between them. A clipboard swung. Their shoes were rubber and did not squeak. A third man carried a small kit. The door to the suite opened because it had been set to open. The men entered with their heads down the way men enter rooms in which they are paid to be invisible. They spoke a name and a set of phrases that sound like care when you have not heard them read from a script. A woman's voice answered and rose to argue. The men moved in the way of procedure. One officer and the security supervisor waited in the hallway and watched the clock. A camera caught the entrance. Another watched the exit. In the monitor room, a small red light blinked and continued to blink. They rolled the stretcher back out 6 minutes later. The woman on it was awake and sang a full string of words that did not affect the straps. The kit closed with a click. The elevator arrived. The doors closed. The tape held. The paperwork had the right signatures and the right warning boxes checked. The badge on the shoulder read the right letters. The wrong story was caught in the right net. At 4, Adon cleaned up the last of the glasses. He hummed without noticing. One glass had cracked by itself from the stress of hot water. He set it aside for the trash. The room smelled of mop soap and the last exhale of candles. The riser where the car had sat looked bare. The bow lay in a silk bag near my chair. Tyler wandered back in like a man looking for a hat he had set down in a different life. His tie was in his pocket. His shirt had a wrinkle that had not been there. He stopped by the mirror and studied himself as if trying to line up two images. "What do we have left?" he asked. It was not rhetorical. It was a man asking for a list in a place where lists used to organize mornings. I pulled a set of keys from my bag. The tag was the old metal kind, heavy stamped with Georgetown. The edges had been rubbed smooth by years. The ring clicked once against my wedding band. "Heat," I said. "Flour, time if you want it." He looked at the keys as if they were a language he had to remember. He put out his hand. He let the weight sit in his palm. The keys made a small sound like a bell when they settled. Blood dotted his knuckles where glass had kissed him earlier. He looked at the red and wiped it on his pants without care. He took a breath that reached the bottom of his ribs. He nodded once. He looked at me and did not look away. The chandeliers dimmed as the timers reached their mark. The marble gave back the faint warmth of the day. I picked up the silk bag and felt the cool of the bow through the fabric. The scar on my knuckle ticked like a watch. The night sat down around us and held still. The courthouse smelled like paper and winter coats. Fluorescent lights flattened every surface. Tyler stood beside me with his hands quiet at his sides. Patricia spoke to the clerk, then to the judge's assistant, and the right forms moved to the right pile. Bigamy is a word that dries the mouth. The marriage was void. The stamp came down once clean and final. Dr. Klein kept his eyes on a spot near the floor when Aaron asked him to confirm the entries in his ledger. He said the number, 15,000. He said he had not meant harm. Aaron's face did not change. The court noted the charges and set the calendar. The hallway felt warmer when we stepped out. A week later, in a courtroom with darker wood, Sloane sat beside a public defender and kept a hand flat on her belly. Her hair was unstyled and looked more honest. She watched her name spoken in 3 parts: birth and false and taken, fraud, identity theft. The plea was entered. The judge asked 3 questions that did not care how anyone felt. Rosa sat 2 rows behind her with the tin on her lap and did not blink. When the sentence came, a murmur ran around the benches and died. 15 years. Consideration for a pregnancy. The words were measured. The bailiff opened the side door. Sloane stood and almost stumbled. She steadied herself on the table without asking. She did not look back as they led her away. Rosa put one hand on the tin and its lid rattled once. In the Georgetown kitchen at 4, the heat lifted in waves. Tyler came through the alley door and set 2 coffees down like offerings. He rolled his sleeves. His knuckles had healed into small pale commas. He washed his hands with care and shook off the water the way he always did, 2 quick flicks. "Start with the old roll," he said. He weighed water and flour with the patience I had held for him when he was small. The dough came together and turned smooth under his palm. He learned again how to listen with the heel of his hand. We shaped in silence. The rack filled. When the first pans went in, the room changed. Air went sweet. Steam climbed. The burn line on my knuckle warmed, not with pain, but with the memory of work done right. By 7, the line reached the sidewalk. A woman in a navy coat stood near the door with a canvas bag folded over her arm. Her eyes were wet in the way the eyes get when weather and feeling meet. She held a paper number between 2 fingers. "You are back," she said to me under the hum of the case lights. "We were always here," I said, and passed her a still warm bowl. The crust spoke when she squeezed, and she smiled the way people smile when the room they loved is in place again. We rehired the managers who knew how to read the dough by smell. Carmen came in with a scarf around her hair and hugged Lila so tight the spoon crock rattled. Maria set a schedule without looking at a screen. Tessa found the box of old paper order forms and smoothed each page as if it had a breath of its own. The chrome chairs left as quietly as we could manage. The moss panel came down and revealed a blue wall with a scuff that looked like a shoreline. Blue hearth stayed where it was meant to stay. Patricia oversaw signatures and delivered envelopes with seals that looked too heavy for their weight. She stood in our doorway on a rainy afternoon and accepted a chocolate chip cookie like it was a retainer. Theo bolted a small camera close to the ceiling and tested its angle with a grin. He installed a slim ledger on a countertop iPad and set permissions like a puzzle he was finishing. He pointed to the screen. "Green is clean," he said. "If it goes yellow, call me." Lila took her apron off at the end of a Tuesday and folded it once, then again. She smoothed the hem with both palms. We gave her a chair by the window and a key that fit the back door, and a promise that the kettle would always be full. She cried into a napkin and scolded us for fussing. The next morning she came in at 6, sat in the chair, and told 2 teenagers to stop leaning on the pastry case with their elbows. The G63 sat in a warehouse with other objects that looked like money made into shape. The auctioneer wore a tie too bright and shoes that would have hurt my feet. The car gleamed like a mirror that did not want to hold faces. The license plate read, Rec N40 neat black on white. People raised paddles and the room warmed from the breath of wanting. The hammer fell on a number that made the staff at the back straighten up. Paper moved across a table with a speed that said this was a practiced ritual. The bow lay in its silk bag on a chair. We took a check across town to a small office that still smelled of paint. A metal sign on the wall read Hearth Foundation. The letters were simple and square. They caught the light. Tyler set the check on the desk, and the woman behind it, who wore a thrift store blazer and had kind eyes, placed a hand on it like a book. We added our own checks, and the totals sat there quiet and ready. Later that week, a woman came in with a bruise that had faded to green and a voice that had learned to be too small. She left with a hotel key, a phone that belonged to her, a temporary restraining order that Aaron's office had stamped before lunch, and a card with 3 numbers she could call. She stood at the door and pressed it closed with care. The sound it made was soft and final. In a visitation room that tried to be cheerful with pale yellow paint, Rosa held a baby with hair like dark silk. The child's fingers curled around Rosa's thumb and uncurled. Rosa sang under her breath in a tune that must have lived in her before any of this. An officer brought papers to sign. He bent his head. He smiled at the baby without moving his mouth much. When it was done, Rosa tucked the papers into a new envelope and the tin went back under her chair. "Thank you," she said to me as we walked to the parking lot, "for the space to start again." I shook my head and she did not insist. The wind off the hill was clean. The baby slept with her mouth open the way babies do who are sure of a chest to lie against. Rosa laid her hand over the small back and closed her eyes for a breath. Tyler brought someone to dinner at the house that sits under the maple. Sarah Monroe arrived with rain on her coat and laughter in her pocket that she did not spill on the table. She spoke with care and listened with care and did not touch Tyler's hand until he had something to say that needed a place to rest. Patricia made a joke that got half a smile out of me. The roast cooled a little and then was perfect. The window reflected us in pieces. The pieces fit. When the house was quiet, I set the silk bag on the kitchen table. I drew the bow out and laid it flat. The satin held the memory of its knot. I opened my grandmother's tin and tucked the ribbon under the paper where her script says 1 cup milk and means whole not skim. The hinges of the tin clicked like a tiny door. I put it back on the shelf. At 4 the next morning, I woke without the alarm. The city lay low and gray. The kitchen lights made their own sun. I drove to Georgetown because that is what my feet wanted. Tyler was already there, leaning against the prep table with his palms flat and his eyes clear. We said nothing. We measured. The mixer hummed like a low hymn. Heat grew. Steam lifted. Outside the alley smelled like rain and yeast and the sweet burn of sugar on iron. When the first loaves sang, we stood still and listened. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.